Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Cherie Best. You're listening to the Just Love Them podcast. Join me on this journey to understand and find peace with those we love who have left their faith. This is the very first episode of this podcast. I'm excited to embark on this journey where I'll not only be sharing my personal story and insights, but also engaging in insightful interviews with individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences as they share their insights. I am the mother of 7 living children, a life coach, nurse, author, and entrepreneur, and I never wanted to start a podcast. This is my story. This podcast is for anyone of any faith. I happen to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a life coach, I was recently wondering, what direction did God want me to focus on? What should be my niche? I received the very clear direction that I needed to help people whose loved ones have left their faith. 6 of my 7 children have left their faith. I have worked through all those hard feelings, the embarrassment, the grief, the sorrow, the heartache, the anger. It all comes. I've worked through it, and I wanted to put it in a closet and close the door. But that's not what God wanted for me. So as I was driving to the temple to ask God, what did he want me to do with this information? How should I help people? One of the things that came very clearly to me was to start a podcast. I hardly even know what a podcast is. I've almost never listened to one. So it's been a lot of research to figure out how to do this. And here I am. Let me tell you my story. I raised my children with the assumption that if I did all the right things, they would follow the faith. In my church, we do things called family home evening, family prayer, family scripture study. I know other faiths do some of these things too, maybe all of them. And so growing up, though we weren't perfect, we tried to read scriptures with our children every day. We tried to remember to have family prayers twice a day, in the morning and at night. We tried really hard to remember to have family home evening every Monday night. We tried to be the very best parents we can be. And while we made tons of mistakes, we tried really hard. And I had that strong belief, if we raised them and did all the right things, they would follow. We took them to church every week. We sent them to all the youth things that they had the opportunity to be involved in. As my oldest started to become a teenager, it became apparent to me that she didn't really buy in to what we were teaching her. I was kind of surprised. She had really good friends that were all involved in the faith and did all the right things. And my faith has brought me so much joy and comfort. I just want that for my children. I wanted that for them, which is why I tried so hard to immerse them in it, to help them to feel the joy and the peace and the direction that I feel. Anytime you have something that you love so much, you just want to share it with those around you, especially those you care about. And I cared about my children, and I do care about my children more than anything. You know, as a parent, you would do anything for a child. And that's what I wanted. I wanted my children to be as happy in their faith as I was in mine. But my oldest child, she did not seem the least bit interested. And as she grew into a teenager, it was very apparent she wanted really nothing to do with it. Because she was such a good child and she wanted so much to please her parents, she followed and went through the motions and did the things that, we asked her to do. She didn't fight us, but she definitely wasn't interested. The minute she grew up and old enough to leave the home, she did. And she didn't have anything to do with church. And I wasn't surprised. Well, our second oldest, we raised him up the same way. He was coming right behind her, and we did all the things with him. It was also kind of apparent that he wasn't interested as he became a teenager. He wasn't as much of a people pleaser as she was, and so he was a little bit more rebellious, although he was more under the surface with it. Like, he tried to keep us happy on the surface, but underneath, he was not interested. And it was not surprising to me that he did not follow in our footsteps either. It was very disappointing, but it wasn't surprising. Well, child number 3, I had high hopes that this child, as he became a teenager, would follow in our footsteps. He seemed to do all the things. He seemed to be okay with everything. He followed along. He didn't rebel in any way, shape, or form that I could see. And he went off to college, and I had high hopes that he would go to church, that he would want to do the things we wanted him to do. But he didn't. He didn't want anything to do with church. He never went to church. He was a good, good boy, but he didn't really want anything to do with it. At this point, I really began to wonder, what am I doing wrong? And at this point, my children seemed to be the only ones making these choices. This was maybe 10 or more years ago. Everyone else's children seemed to be following the pattern of their parents. My children didn't. I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I wondered what I was doing wrong. I knew it had to be my fault. I thought I knew it had to be my fault. What had I done wrong? So very wrong that 3 out of 3 children wanted nothing to do with the church. I asked those questions. I didn't have answers. Then child number 4 seemed to be making a difference. She seemed to be following in our footsteps. She graduated from high school and went off to college. She went to church. I was thrilled beyond words. And then child number 5 came up and graduated, and he went on a mission. That's what they do in our church. They go and serve the Lord and help others come up into Christ. And then the 4th child, who was in college, decided to go on a mission. I was thrilled. I finally had missionaries. I was excited. I was so excited that these children were following in the way we raised them. And then child number 6 graduated from high school. She decided to go on a mission. I was in 7th heaven. I was so excited that finally something seemed to be taking hold. The way that I'd raised them was taking hold. It meant so much to me. And then child number 7, she had some physical problems. She graduated from high school. She didn't go on a mission. She went to college, but she had a little missionary heart and a light inside her. She was one of those people that you meet, and because of her physical challenges at the time that were very apparent to people around her, she was just a light. She was one of those people that you just want to be around, that you just feel better when you're around them. It's like you just draw on their light, like it just showers over you. She brought many people to the gospel through her light. And I was so happy that 4 of my children, while I loved all 7 equally, 4 of my children seemed to bring me joy because they were following in the way that I wanted them to, that I knew that was going to make them happy, because really what I wanted for my children was for them to be happy. And I truly believed that the best way for them to be happy was to follow the path that I was following. I wanted them to follow my path because I wanted them to be happy. And I thought that that's what they needed. Well, then things fell apart. My 4th child, she returned from her mission. She married in the temple, and she seemed to be following in the path. Child number 5 returned from his mission, got married in the temple, seemed to be following the path. Child number 6 returned from her mission, got married in the temple, and seemed to be following the path. That doesn't sound like things falling apart, does it? I was thrilled. Child number 4 stayed active in church, but child number 5, he and his wife were living with us at the time, and pretty soon he started not wanting to go to Sunday school. And then he didn't want to go to church at all. And then he didn't want to be married anymore. It was a devastatingly dark and hard time for me. I was so confused. I did not know what was happening to my child. It was such a strange thing, one I had never anticipated. I could not understand. The struggle between us in our relationship became evident. He tested me. The first 3 were not as hard as this one. This test was harder. I wasn't expecting this. This was a sharp turn in his life that I had not seen coming, and I couldn't understand. And he struggled to feel loved and accepted for his choices, which he had every right to make. And so we went through that journey with him. Then child number 6, who was also married in the temple, she and her husband also were returned missionary. They stopped going to church. They started making choices that surprised me, that I was so sad about, and our relationship struggled. And then child number 7, my little light, she also started making choices that I was surprised by. First, the way she dressed started to change. I had no idea that this was an external evidence of what was going on inside her. She'd had some traumatic things happen in her life, and she started to turn a corner and go a different direction. She not only turned a corner and went a different direction, she went from one extreme to the other, to the most extreme I could have, more extreme than I could ever have imagined. I got to my lowest, deepest point. I was crushed by my children's choices. I was devastated by my children's choices. I remember one day, all my children had moved out, and I had this room. It had been a bedroom, and I was cleaning it out, going through it, repurposing it into a different room. And up in the closet, I had all these boxes of things I had saved from when my children were babies. I had their baby blanket and a little stuffed animal that had belonged to each child. And I got those boxes down to go through them, to pack them differently, to put them somewhere else. And as I was going through those things, just the most overwhelming, devastating feeling came to me. I had had such high hopes for those children when they were born, of what I wanted them to be, of what I envisioned their life would be, of what I thought I could shape and mold them into. And it had not come to fruition. 6 out of those 7 children had made choices different from what I had planned for them. And isn't it interesting that I thought I got to plan their lives? So I was going through this, and I was home alone. And I'm sitting on the floor looking at their baby blankets and their stuffed animals and their little baby booties. And I just had my wound opened so big. And I sobbed. I'd cried many times, but this was the deepest, gut-wrenching, soul-wrenching crying I've maybe ever done. And I sobbed from the depths of my soul, wailing and crying. I didn't have to stifle it because no one was home. And my soul just broke. I cried so deeply. I don't know if you've ever had an experience where you've just cried from the depths of what's inside of you. And so here I was on the floor in this bedroom, weeping and wailing literally out of sorrow. My heart is so broken into 1,000 pieces because of the choices of my children. And I'm so sad about it. Well, as I'm doing in the middle of doing this, in walks my youngest daughter. She had come home and I hadn't heard her. And she came in the door with this most concerned look on her face, of course. And she's like, Mom, what's wrong? I mean, you'd think someone had just died. And I had no excuses. I couldn't cover this. I couldn't cover it up. I couldn't hide it. And so I literally just told her how sad I was about her choices, how sad I was about the other children's choices. I kind of was in a place where I could not sugarcoat, where I could not pretend. I couldn't even be tactful. I just told her everything. And she received it really well, especially because I'm telling her that I'm so sad about her. And I had never told her anything like that before. And I just told her everything. I thought, literally in my heart, I thought that her seeing how sad I was and letting me explain all that to her, I thought it was going to change her back. I literally did. I thought, how could she not see and go back to the person that she knows she should be, in my mind that she should be? That's in my mind, right? Who she should be. I thought, how could she not? How could she have seen how broken I am and not change? Well, she didn't. She was a beautiful listener. She listened, she understood, she even cried with me. But it did not change the path that she was on. It did not change her. And to her credit, she was willing to let me say all of that, and she still loved me. She didn't get defensive. Well, after that, I just realized I could not live with this wound. It was literally crushing me. It was literally affecting my life to the point where I couldn't function. And it was affecting my relationships with my children. I couldn't live like that anymore. I hit a wall. I hit a place where I'm like, I cannot live like this anymore. Something has got to change. And so I prayed and I begged God to help me. I needed to just love my children. I needed to not have this wound. I needed to be able to function and I needed to be happy. I was feeling all this sorrow and remorse about something that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me. I didn't cause anything. I had to get to the point where I realized that I didn't cause this. And that will probably come out in some other places in another podcast where I got to that place, how I got to that place that this wasn't my fault. I didn't do something wrong, but that actually, well, I made lots of mistakes, but we all have our agency. So I started to change. God gave me answers. He gave me help. He gave me comfort and peace and solace. Then I started to change. And then my biggest test came. My youngest daughter I told you she'd gone from one extreme to the other. Well, she'd gotten to the extreme where she was making some choices where she was involved in a relationship with a couple. And she wanted me to accept them. Not only did she want me to accept them, she wanted to bring them to her family birthday party that was at our house. She asked me if she could. I didn't say no. I said, I need some time. Let me get back to you. That's when I had to really dig deep. I had always told my children, I love you no matter what. I didn't realize God was going to test me so much on that. I love you no matter what. Am I going to love you if you make these choices? I had to figure this out. I got back on my knees and I'm like, God, I need more help. I'm not okay with this. I don't know if I can be nice to this couple. I don't know. I don't know if I can be okay with this. I don't know if I can smile. I don't think I can pretend that. I need a change of heart. Please, please help me. And he did. He changed my heart. He helped me in an instant to see this couple the way he sees them as individuals, as his children. He helped me to see that he loves them as much as he loves me, that he loves my daughter and each of my children as much as he loves me. And I feel his love. I know he loves me. I haven't always felt that way, but I've come to that. And maybe that'll be another episode too. But I have come to that place where I know he loves me. I know it. And he told me that he loves them as much as he loves me. And he helped me to see it. Well, we had the birthday party. The couple came. I was able to genuinely see them, hug them, and love them as God does. Not because I was capable, but because God is capable. He changed my heart. And he taught me something. He taught me to see the good in my children. He taught me to look for the good. This was some direction that he gave me, and I started doing it. I started when one child would come over, I would intentionally, instead of, this is what I used to do. A child would come over and I would immediately notice how they were dressed, which wasn't how I taught them when they were raised. And then I would notice their language, and then I would notice the kinds of things they talked about, all the negative things. It was like I didn't say anything to them out loud, but it was like I was criticizing them. And you know, when someone's criticizing you, you can kind of feel it. You can sense it. It changes the vibration. And that's why it was affecting the relationship. So that while my children and I had a great relationship on the surface, they had to sense that I was not really okay with them. And so when God taught me to look for the good, I made a conscious choice. I remember the very first time one of my daughters came over and I knew she was coming. And before she came, I consciously made a choice that I was going to only look for the good and I was going to ignore everything else. And so she came through the door. I didn't pay attention at all to what she was wearing, how she was talking. I was literally looking, what's good about this child? What do I like about this child? And I noticed some really good things. I noticed some great things about their character, how they loved other people, and about how they were making great choices in their career, and about how they loved their spouse and their own children. I saw good that I hadn't really noticed before because I was too busy looking for the stuff I didn't like. I noticed all this good stuff. It was almost like I saw that child through new eyes. And when she left, I felt love and appreciation for her in a way I don't know if I ever had before. I felt so different. And so I started looking for the good in each of my children. And every time I was with them, I ignored everything else. And I just started looking for evidence of what was good about this child. As I did that, my relationships with them changed. My feelings about them changed. I started to think that I had the greatest kids in the entire world. I didn't just start to think that, I knew it. My kids are the most amazing, the most wonderful, the most talented, just the greatest kids that have ever lived on the face of the earth. I knew it. And all the things that I had been paying attention to before, the choices they were making, how I felt about them, the disappointment, the embarrassment, the wondering what I had done wrong, all of that is gone. And if it's gone for me, it can be gone for you too. I want to give you hope. It's possible. And so my best tip today, I have maybe two really big things that worked for me. One I'll share another time. My best tip I want to share with you today is look for the good. It's 4 words. Look for the good. If you will take those loved ones that you are struggling with, you're either sad, you're mad, you're embarrassed, whatever your emotion is, if you will take those 4 words and implement them, look for the good. Ignore everything else. Tune everything else out. Like those horses that they put blinders on so they can only see forward. If you will do that and just look for that evidence, look for the good, it will change the way you see that loved one. This works not only in this topic, but for anyone that you are struggling with. Look for the good. It's so simple. It's so simple you're going to think it doesn't work. It's so simple you're going to think I don't need to do that. But I'm telling you, it's magic. Look for the good. It works. I want to thank you for listening to me today. This being the very first episode, I feel a great need for this podcast to get to the people who are struggling, the ones who are in pain, the ones whose wounds are open like mine was. They need this podcast. I'm going to be interviewing people from all different places, people who have been the one who was inactive and came back to the gospel, came back to their faith, to those who are mothers who have struggled, to those who are spouses who have struggled, to experts, to those who are still on the other side of their faith and sharing from their perspective. It's going to be a great journey. And I hope you'll join me again next time. Please share this with anyone who could benefit from it and hit subscribe. I'll see you again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.